I mean, I think, as I say, it is an interesting situation because I worked for ILE. I initially set up and was Secretary General of the European Commission because I was running meetings in Europe, which were not ILE meetings, and they didn't like that. And so we had long conversations, and then they recruited me, which is probably the easiest way of getting rid of me. And then I became President European of the European Commission, and I worked there for 4 years, after which I became Vice President of ILE, and then 4 years I was Treasurer of ILE. And about that time, all the monies, there was the crash with the money, and we had made all the arrangements for giving money to people in the different parts of the organization. And then halfway through, we had to change it all and take all the money back and all the rest of it. And then I thought about, did I want to carry on with ILE? I was busy with my own research group and my work, and I realized that I really couldn't run ILE properly and run my clinics and all the other things I was doing in my research program. And so I quietly backed off. And then it's about 12 years ago. Gradually, as my career started to wane, as it of course would do as you get older, it struck me that I really wanted to give something back to people with epilepsy. Treating their epilepsy, being nice to them, talking to their families, that's my business. And I'm good at that, but that's not the same. So trying to give something back to people with epilepsy, I put my name forward to be president of IB. To be honest, I didn't expect to be elected, and I was only elected by two votes. And then I thought, gosh, what have I done? It sounded like a good idea at the time, to be president, but I've got to do something with this. I've got to make a difference. So I looked at what I had inherited, and of course, around about that time, the situation was starting to get different with the congresses. We're not making as much money, and a lot of the IBE money came from congresses, and so we had to look at a new way forward. And then, of course, we had the COVID, and so the whole area of the whole business had to change. And I looked to what I could do from the positive side and what I couldn't do, and I realized that actually this is an opportunity to make a big difference to the way IBE works and to what we can do with people around the world, because we're all talking to one another in a way we never did before COVID came along. So chance, a lot of it chance, but nevertheless, I now think that what I've done in the last 4 years is way more important than what I did in the previous 25, 30 years.
In the beginning of my professional path, I wanted to become a neuroscientist or a scientist, and I ended up to do a PhD in neuroscience, tackling the function of a gene that was involved in brain development. And we actually found that this gene was mutated. We found a mutation in a couple of families that had what at that time was called idiopathic generalized epilepsy. After my PhD, I became interested in economics and management of the biomedical research sector. And obtained a master's degree in international healthcare economics, management, and policy, which eventually led me to a visiting scholarship at the Georgetown University Kennedy Institute of Ethics in Washington, D.C., USA. And there I studied and researched bioethics and science policy. So it was through these studies that I decided that science management could be a good fit for me. And the opportunity came soon after, when I was recruited by a major Italian charity, the Telethon Foundation, whose mission is to advance research towards the cure of rare genetic diseases. And as a manager there for about 10 years, I have gained a long-standing experience in matters pertaining to science evaluation and management and development of a research portfolio, contributing to a mandate of a stakeholders community. Another important part of my position in Telethon regarded the management of the Patient Support Office, an office that gathered all outreach activities with stakeholders, but mainly patients and their organizations. And if I, let's say, connect the dots, I would say I was preparing for the big transition that happened later with my daughter's epilepsy diagnosis. You see, epilepsy crossed my life path twice, and the second time to stay there forever. And so I became part of that community of people, those in need of cure and care, on whose behalf I had worked up as a manager until then. So eventually I embraced a new personal and also professional path when I joined the Italian Epilepsy Federation, which eventually led me to start collaborate with the IBE. And I served the IBE for 4 years as a member of the European Regional Executive Committee, and gradually I became passionate about the IBE, and I began to see the opportunity for long overdue social change for the epilepsy community. You know, through its global network, its advocacy capacity, the IBE can be the driver of a life-changing movement. And that's why I wanted to be part and to contribute to this change. And that's why I'm here. And I hope to witness at least, you know, this, the beginning of, as I say, a life-changing movement.
And I came from nothing. My father cut hair for a living. And for me to have the opportunity of doing something for people has been such a privilege. I like to think I've done bits and pieces for myself as well, but that wasn't ever the driver for me. And although I always sort of regarded it as my research as being part of what I'm doing for people with epilepsy, it's always been practical. It's not been basic, not much of it anyway, and it's always geared at doing something positive. How different is that from what I'm doing now? And I'll only be doing it for another month. Hugely different. Just to have had the opportunity to see what is needed and to aim at the goal that IBE has to make a difference to people with epilepsy, whether it's through WHO or whether it's through individual clinicians or just talking to people. It really is what it's all about. It really does make a difference. And if I can even have somebody special take on my role, and there's one special person sitting opposite me here, then I've achieved something. Because, you know, when I started, the organization wasn't going in the direction that it needed to go. And I can say that, and I hope that people would agree. And it took me about a week to figure that out. And then it took a lot longer to figure out what to do about it. I don't think there could be any more different presidents of organizations than Francesca and me. We are completely different. I had, you know, I'm an epileptologist. I trained as a clinical pharmacologist and a general physician. I did emergency medicine until a few years back before I took over IBE, and I'm not a neurologist. In 1982, I began, when I came back to Glasgow, I thought, what am I going to do as a career? I'm doing emergency medicine, but I haven't any particular specialty as such. And I had been working with carbamazepine as a clinical pharmacologist to see what it did to drug metabolism, and particularly in its own metabolism. And of course, it was a well-known anti-seizure drug at that time. So I thought, I'll do some studies. So I started to put some studies together, mainly volunteer stuff and not in patients. And no one had done epilepsy as a specialty. And so all the patients that people had, they referred to me. And I realized that here was a potential that I could do something worthwhile. And so we set up the epilepsy clinic a long time ago, long before your time, Francesca. 1982, I set up my clinic. And I started to do the trials, both regulatory trials and pharmacological trials. And as I said, people were referring me patients. I was getting patients from accident emergency because no one, as soon as they came in with a seizure, they were just sent home again. And when we set up our service, they were sent to us, and we started looking at newly diagnosed epilepsy over many years. And the work that we published is now highly cited, and one of the papers is the most cited epilepsy paper in New England Journal with Patrick Kwan, who's now, of course, in Melbourne. So it was all sort of chance, really, except that I always regarded myself, and I regard myself as a clinician, as a doctor, as someone who cares about patients. And so I was able to link my research, a research interest, with that, and with the fact that I could make a difference for people with epilepsy. But it's one thing for me to do something in a clinic for a person with epilepsy, and it's a very different thing from them to make a difference in their community, in their lives, and for their family, and for other people's family. And we have to give them the opportunity for making those achievements for themselves and for others.
Rather than actual role models, there are two inspirations that I would like to share, because I believe these are guiding me in this journey. The first comes from the Stoic philosophy and Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. And as I say this, I realize that it could be used against me to blame me for, you know, delusions of imperialism, which could not be farther from the truth. The reality is that in my darkest hours, I found relief and strength in reading Marcus Aurelius. It allowed me to see the opportunity in even the greatest loss of my life, because, you know, he wrote something that I think applies to all lives and all undertakings, including that of leading an international organization that, you know, faces big challenges and a lot of obstacles. And what he wrote, I have it on my desk. It sits on my desk all the time I go back and read it, especially when I'm feeling down. And what Marco Aurelio wrote is, our action may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our actions. The impediment to actions advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And this is exactly what happened to me when I decided to embrace the cause of, becoming an epilepsy advocate. Epilepsy was my big obstacle, and I fully embraced it. And the second inspiration comes to me from, I find it in the history of mankind. What has led us to achieve great things as a species is our intrinsic ability to connect to each other and to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. So I hope to be able to lead an IBE that will become more and more connected with its membership and the society, the outside world, able to cooperate flexibly with all stakeholders, and ultimately capable of turning obstacles upside down. That's my vision. My goal for the next 4 years is actually to plant a seed for the long-awaited social change I just spoke about, and kind of enabling the process that will lead to a change for our community. And for this to happen, in my opinion, we need a 3-level strategy, and that's my plan. I mean, individual level, community level, and ultimately systemic level. I think at the individual and community level, the IBE can count on its membership and work with them to increase health literacy first, and engagement of people with epilepsy and their families, so that they become more and more able to cope with epilepsy, more effective in their interactions with the health system, and ultimately more fulfilled in their lives. So I think education and engagement are priorities in my plan. At the systemic level, the IBE has always played a very crucial advocacy action together with the ILE, and I think global advocacy will be crucial during my term, with the approval of this intersectoral global action plan on epilepsy and other neurological disorders. This will mark a major turning point after decades of relentless effort from the IBE and the ILE. I think we're now going to have to become even better advocates if we want to see this plan to turn into real change. For education, and when I speak about education and health literacy, the plan is to build a training program for people with epilepsy and their family first, that ultimately will increase their health literacy, of course, and their self-management capacity. Health literacy is an important determinant of health, and we believe we need to equip people with epilepsy epilepsy with skills so that they can cope with epilepsy in their daily life and be more effective in looking after themselves, so that, you know, their quality of life would improve. And this program will be called the IBE Academy and will be a 2-level program. There will be, you know, training for people with epilepsy and families and caregivers on epilepsy and the management of epilepsy, but there will be also 2nd-level training for selected people and people committed to become epilepsy advocates. And the training will be different. We hope to train people who can stand up and speak for our community on behalf of you know, the 50 million people living with epilepsy worldwide, and interact with regulators, public health authorities, with the media, and with the civil society. So this is, you know, very briefly an overview, a rough overview of the IBE Academy.
The initiatives that Francesca started to discuss all link into a way of bringing people with epilepsy and their carers and the people who care for them into our global agenda, into our local agenda, of course, too, but also into our global agenda. The Academy is the sort of, if you like, the most ambitious part of this program. But we also have a research group that we're working on. We're looking at, let me just see what I've got down here. A youth action group, and we've got young people who are working with us and for us and with them and for them, other people, kids with epilepsy. And a group that we call professional achievements, so that we can help people to do something that with their lives that they want to do and that they've not thought they couldn't do before. So all of these sort of things link into the Academy, and it sort of brings everything into the same goal, which is for people with epilepsy and people who care about them to actually run the epilepsy business rather than academics and clinicians, which is arguably the case. I've got nothing against doctors. I'm a doctor, but at the same time, doctors think differently from people who aren't medical. And although we're not saying we're never going to work with doctors, I think that the scenario that I see our organization going to is very different from the one that I'm coming from. And I would like to think that I was the guy who started it, who started the process, and Francesca's the guy who takes it forward, and then we'll see where it goes. I think this is very important, and I think that neither can flourish wholly without the other. Whether you are partners or whether you are working together, it maybe doesn't matter greatly as long as you do it, because when you've got a big organization that has got funding from journals and other things, and you've got a little organization which is really about people and what we can do for people, it doesn't link up easily. And what I would not like to happen is to see that the big organization eats the little organization. And one of the reasons that I was so keen to develop the IBE in the direction that it's going, and to have Francesca and other colleagues involved, is because Francesca is not ILE. She can't possibly look like INE, whatever you do to her, but I can. And so I am now IBE, I'm not ILE, and I am aware that I do not want people, ILE people, to be in IBE, working with them, yes, but not being part of them. So, this was a part of the discussion, because I know that some people in our organization think it would be beneficial to us and to ILE for us to be connected together. And there are many organizations where the lay organization and the medical one do work together. And they like it, and I have no problem with that. Will that happen for us? I don't know. It won't happen for me. Obviously it might happen for you, and it might happen up at the 20 years from now. But I think the most important thing is that we are separate and we represent different aspects of epilepsy and people with epilepsy, and we have goals that are synergistic but not the same. So that is part of that discussion, because that arguably that discussion is going to be there, whether you like it or not. Do you need both organizations? I'm absolutely convinced that we need both organizations. It would be nice if we had some of ILE's money, or anybody's money for that matter. You asked me, what I could have wished for early on. When I took over 4 years ago, somebody wrote to me and said, I've got a person with money and they want to give it to IBE, and it's $1 million. So I started to think about how I'm going to spend $1 million. I'm still thinking about how I'm going to spend $1 million, because we never got it. And I just hope that Francesca gets her $1 million when she takes over IBE, because that would be such a difference if we had $1 million. So we have to have money, we have to have commitment, and we have to have positivity, we have to have success, we have to have pleasant interaction, we have to care about each other, we have to care about people with epilepsy. And all of that we can do either as partners directly with ILE or separately with ILE, but always with ILE.
I completely share your vision of a strong partnership that can become even more powerful to me, because I think the big challenge IBE and ILE are facing demands for a very strong partnership, a renewed partnership. The challenge is huge: improving the lives of people with epilepsy. To succeed in this, I think we must go beyond our circle, beyond ourselves. We need to focus on the outside world and find ways to influence society. And we can succeed by integrating our different skills and perspectives. I see this partnership as kind of, I am a runner. So I see it as running a relay race and passing the baton to each other, always believing that one day we will be able to cut the finish line. And this new partnership of care among the two organizations that have different ownerships of the epilepsy endeavor, we will really make a life-changing movement real and active. That's my view. So there is one last thing that I feel strongly I need to share, and it's my thank to Martin Brody because it's true. He made it possible. He planted the seed of the change that is happening, and it is thanks to him if I'm here and I'm comfortable in this position, because I feel he is behind me. He is my mentor, and a light that will guide me in the journey for the coming 4 years. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say that. And believe me, it means a lot because, as I say, I was a different person when I took over from IBE 4 years ago than I am now. And you know, you've been part of helping me to see the way forward too, you know, and I don't think anybody of us who works in epilepsy could do anything else but work together, because it's such an awful thing to have and to affect your family, and you well know that, and to, so that how can we do something to make a difference? We must think that way. Everybody must think that way. I think we've covered what we both feel, and not just what we think. And you know, the bits of it that are what you think are nowhere near as important and as relevant in your life as what you feel. And I just hope that, you know, we can find many more people who feel the way we do about what we need to do for epilepsy. Not necessarily who do it, I mean, that's your own choice, but who feel that they want to help. You know, whether it's medical, whether it's lay people, whether it's people with epilepsy, whether it's people who look after people with epilepsy, the challenge is there for all of us, and people with epilepsy and their carers deserve what we're wanting to help, how we're wanting to help them. And it's very difficult to put that into words, you know, just because you could say that about any disorder, or any medical condition, you know, but epilepsy somehow or other is different from that, and it's been different from that for what, 4,000 years, 6,000 years. It's in the history books right from the beginning of time.